The handcuffs clicked shut around Dr. Nathaniel Vaughn's wrists inside the very hotel he built. The sound was sharp enough to silence the entire lobby. 1 second earlier, people had been laughing over champagne beneath crystal chandeliers, while a jazz trio played softly near the marble staircase. But the moment security forced his hands behind his back, every conversation stopped at once. A woman standing beside the concierge desk dropped her champagne glass so suddenly that it shattered across the polished floor. Nobody moved. More than 200 guests turned toward the scene together, their eyes fixed on the tall black man in the charcoal suit being restrained beside the front desk of the Crown Meridian Hotel in downtown Chicago. And then the phones came out, one after another. Guests lifted them into the air and started recording what they believed was another wealthy hotel trying to remove a dangerous man from its property. Security officers tightened their grip around Nathaniel's arms while people whispered all around him. Some stared with curiosity, others with suspicion, a few with sympathy, but none of them understood what they were actually watching. Because the man being humiliated in front of the entire lobby was not a trespasser. He was not a thief, and he was not a stranger. The man security had just handcuffed was the billionaire owner of every single hotel in the Vaughn International chain. 52 luxury properties spread across America, Europe, and the Middle East. Hotels celebrities stayed in. Hotels presidents visited. Hotels where rooms cost more per night than some families earned in a month. And standing there in handcuffs, with security pressing him against a marble counter he personally approved 15 years earlier, Nathaniel Vaughn realized something that chilled him more than the steel around his wrists. This was not a misunderstanding. Something much bigger was happening inside his company. Something organized. Something deliberate. Because 3 hours earlier, an FBI agent had warned him not to come to the hotel alone. Nathaniel ignored that warning. Now he understood why it had been given. Across the lobby entrance, through the towering glass windows facing Michigan Avenue, dark SUVs suddenly rolled to a stop outside the hotel. Their headlights reflected against the rain-soaked pavement as hotel guests slowly turned toward the front doors. Security still held Nathaniel in place, unaware that the next few minutes were about to destroy careers, expose crimes hidden for years, and reveal secrets buried deep inside one of the most successful hotel empires in America. And the most shocking part of all was this. Nathaniel Vaughn had secretly spent the last 6 months investigating his own company. He suspected someone inside Vaughn International was targeting black guests, manipulating internal complaints, and using racial profiling to cover up financial crimes worth millions of dollars. What he never expected was to become the next victim himself. Tonight, in front of hundreds of witnesses, the billionaire owner of the hotel had just been treated like a criminal inside his own building. And before the night was over, federal agents would uncover evidence that changed the luxury hospitality industry forever. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. For the guests standing inside the Crown Meridian Hotel that night, the scene unfolding in front of them looked simple. Security had detained a suspicious man after a wealthy guest accused him of being connected to a missing diamond necklace. It was the kind of public confrontation people filmed every day without asking questions. Another accusation. Another public humiliation. Another black man being treated as dangerous before anyone bothered to learn who he really was. But for the federal agents speeding toward the hotel through downtown Chicago traffic, the situation looked very different. Because the man in handcuffs was not only the billionaire owner of Vaughn International Hotels, he was also the key witness in an active federal investigation that had quietly expanded across 3 states over the previous 4 months. And according to sealed FBI reports, there were already multiple people inside the Crown Meridian Hotel under suspicion long before Nathaniel Vaughn walked through those front doors that evening. What nobody in the lobby understood yet was that this night was never just about a missing necklace. It was about hidden money, erased complaints, intimidation, falsified reports, and a system inside one of America's largest luxury hotel companies that had been operating unchecked for years. The handcuffs around Nathaniel Vaughn's wrists were only the beginning. While security officers held him beside the front desk, Nathaniel stayed unusually calm. That was the detail several witnesses would later mention to reporters. He did not argue. He did not shout. He did not threaten anyone with his power or status. Instead, He simply looked around the lobby with the expression of a man watching his worst suspicions become reality. Because 6 months earlier, Nathaniel had started noticing patterns hidden inside internal company reports. Wealthy black guests were filing complaints at unusually high rates across several Vaughn properties. Executives kept dismissing the incidents as misunderstandings. But Nathaniel noticed something disturbing. The same hotels kept appearing in those complaints. The same managers. The same security supervisors. And somehow, important evidence always disappeared before investigations could be completed. Surveillance footage went missing. Witness reports changed. Internal complaints were quietly closed without explanation. At first, Nathaniel believed it was incompetence. Then he realized something else. Somebody inside his company was protecting people. And whoever they were, they had influence reaching far beyond a single hotel. 3 months before the handcuff incident, Nathaniel secretly hired a private risk assessment team led by former federal investigators. Together, they began auditing Vaughn International properties without informing senior management. What they discovered alarmed even the FBI. Certain executives were allegedly using racial profiling as cover for something much larger. Wealthy black guests were being targeted because staff assumed complaints against them would not attract serious scrutiny. Missing watches, missing jewelry, fraudulent billing charges, disappearing property. Security teams consistently focused suspicion on minority guests, while internal theft networks operated almost invisibly behind the scenes. According to confidential interviews later obtained by investigators, several employees had privately raised concerns for years but were either ignored, transferred, or pressured into silence. And every time Nathaniel got close to identifying who was responsible, another piece of evidence vanished. Someone inside Vaughn International always seemed one step ahead. That was why Nathaniel returned to the Crown Meridian Hotel without warning anyone. Officially, he was supposed to be attending a real estate conference in New York that week. Instead, he boarded a private flight to Chicago under a different booking name and arrived at his flagship property completely alone. Not even the hotel's general manager knew he was coming. Nathaniel wanted to see the truth with his own eyes. He wanted to know how employees behaved when they believed nobody important was watching. And within minutes of entering his own hotel, he got his answer. The valet ignored him. The front desk questioned him. Security watched him. Then came the accusation. Then the handcuffs. Everything happened exactly the way his internal reports predicted it would. But the most disturbing part was not the profiling itself. It was how confident everyone seemed while doing it. Almost rehearsed. As if they already believed they would be protected no matter what happened next. Outside the hotel, rain continued pouring across Michigan Avenue as dark federal SUVs pulled closer to the entrance. Inside the lobby, guests kept filming while security officers exchanged nervous looks. Some employees had started recognizing Nathaniel Vaughn. Others still had no idea who he was. But several people inside that hotel were beginning to panic for a different reason entirely. Because hidden inside FBI case files were financial records, deleted complaint archives, surveillance stills, and internal emails directly connected to the Crown Meridian Hotel. And if those files were accurate, then the public humiliation of Nathaniel Vaughn was about to expose far more than racial profiling. It was about to uncover an operation that had quietly stolen millions while hiding behind the appearance of luxury hospitality. But the most shocking part? Dr. Nathaniel Vaughn had secretly predicted this exact moment months earlier. Long before Dr. Nathaniel Vaughn became one of the most respected names in luxury hospitality, he was just a frightened 12-year-old boy sitting alone in the back hallway of a downtown Chicago hotel, waiting for his mother to finish her shift. Back then, the world looked very different to him. The polished marble floors, chandeliers, and expensive suits did not represent wealth or success. They represented distance. They were reminders that some people were welcomed into luxury, while others were only allowed to clean it after hours. Nathaniel's mother, Denise Vaughn, worked as a housekeeper at the Old Wellington Grand Hotel on the north side of Chicago. She worked double shifts 6 days a week, cleaning rooms for wealthy guests who barely acknowledged her existence. Nathaniel often waited quietly in employee corridors doing homework while his mother finished late-night assignments because she could not afford childcare after school. He still remembered the smell of industrial cleaning chemicals in those hallways. He remembered the exhaustion in his mother's eyes every time she sat beside him during her 15-minute breaks. But more than anything, He remembered the day everything changed forever. It happened during the winter of 1979. Nathaniel was 12 years old when security guards stormed into the employee locker room accusing his mother of stealing an expensive diamond bracelet belonging to a wealthy hotel guest. Nathaniel watched the entire thing happen from the hallway. His mother tried explaining that she had never even entered the guest suite alone, but nobody listened. Security searched her bag in front of other employees while managers stood nearby pretending not to notice her humiliation. Nathaniel would never forget the look on his mother's face as strangers treated her like a criminal without evidence. He remembered how small she looked standing there in her housekeeping uniform while security guards emptied her personal belongings across a metal table. And he remembered the silence afterward. No apology, no dignity, no compassion. 2 hours later, the guest discovered the bracelet inside her own coat pocket. But by then, the damage had already been done. Denise Vaughn cried the entire ride home that night, while Nathaniel sat beside her staring out the frozen car window. That moment buried itself deep inside him. Years later, Nathaniel would say that was the night he learned something painful about America. Some people were presumed innocent. Others had to fight just to be treated like human beings. That memory followed Nathaniel Vaughn for the rest of his life. It followed him through college, through business school, through years of rejection from investors who dismissed him before he finished speaking. By the age of 32, Nathaniel had built his first boutique hotel using borrowed money and a second mortgage on a small apartment building he owned. Most people expected him to fail within a year. Instead, his hotel became profitable within 8 months because Nathaniel understood something many luxury executives ignored. Guests did not remember marble floors as much as they remembered how employees made them feel. Respect became the foundation of his company. Every Vaughn International employee was trained under one principle repeated so often it became legendary throughout the organization. Dignity is not a luxury. It is a right. Over the next 25 years, Nathaniel transformed Vaughn International Hotels into one of the largest privately owned luxury chains in the country. Politicians stayed there. Athletes stayed there. Celebrities praised the service publicly. Hospitality magazines called Nathaniel Vaughn the man who reinvented modern luxury by making emotional experience more important than status. But despite his success, one fear never completely left him. Deep down, Nathaniel worried that the same prejudice his mother experienced decades earlier still existed quietly beneath the polished surface of the hospitality industry. Then came the complaints. At first, they arrived slowly enough to dismiss individually. A black surgeon claimed hotel staff questioned whether his credit card was legitimate. A retired judge reported being followed by security while shopping inside a Vaughn property gift store. A black executive couple alleged they were denied access to a VIP lounge despite presenting valid credentials. Nathaniel noticed a pattern almost immediately. Most of the complaints came from wealthy black guests staying at higher-end Vaughn properties. Yet every internal investigation somehow concluded there was insufficient evidence of discrimination. Then came something even more alarming. Several complaints disappeared entirely from the company database. Nathaniel initially believed it was a technical problem until a longtime employee privately warned him that certain executives were pressuring staff members to bury incidents before corporate leadership could review them. Around the same time, Vaughn International's accounting division uncovered irregularities involving insurance reimbursements and missing luxury inventory across multiple hotels. Expensive jewelry reported stolen by guests later appeared inside internal reimbursement claims. Financial records stopped making sense. Millions of dollars could not be fully explained. That was when Nathaniel realized he was no longer dealing with isolated misconduct. Something larger was operating inside his company. Something protected. Something organized. 6 months before the incident at the Crown Meridian Hotel, Nathaniel quietly launched a secret internal audit without informing senior executives. He hired former federal investigators, behavioral analysts, and cybersecurity specialists under confidential contracts. Together, they created a covert monitoring system designed to track guest treatment patterns in real time. Nathaniel approved installation of AI-assisted surveillance analysis tools capable of identifying differences in how guests were treated based on race, appearance, and perceived wealth. The system monitored check-in interactions, security responses, complaint resolution times, and room assignment patterns across multiple Vaughn properties. The results disturbed him immediately. Black guests were significantly more likely to be questioned about payment methods, more likely to have security interactions, more likely to receive downgraded accommodations after booking premium rooms. And somehow, incidents connected to missing valuables repeatedly occurred at the same hotels where discrimination complaints were highest. Nathaniel decided he needed proof that could not be manipulated by executives protecting themselves. So he began secretly visiting his own hotels unannounced, using alternate travel bookings and minimal security presence. Sometimes he dressed casually and observed staff behavior from the lobby for hours. Other times he booked ordinary rooms under shortened versions of his name to avoid recognition. The results became impossible to ignore. At several properties, employees treated him completely differently once they failed to recognize who he was. One valet ignored him for nearly 10 minutes while assisting white guests who arrived later. A concierge questioned whether he belonged in a private lounge he personally funded years earlier. Each experience confirmed Nathaniel's growing suspicion that bias inside his company was no longer random individual behavior. It had become institutional. And the deeper his investigators looked, the more dangerous the situation appeared. Because behind the discrimination complaints, financial crimes were beginning to surface as well. What Nathaniel Vaughn did not know was that the FBI had already started investigating Vaughn International independently months earlier. Federal agents had been tracking suspicious insurance activity linked to luxury theft claims involving several high-end hotel properties across Illinois, New York, and Nevada. The investigation soon expanded into possible money laundering, internal embezzlement, falsified reimbursement claims, and missing luxury assets tied to hotel management teams. As agents followed financial records, they noticed a troubling connection. In several cases, black guests had initially been blamed or treated as suspects before evidence quietly disappeared. Some victims later withdrew complaints after receiving confidential settlements. Others simply walked away believing nobody would listen to them. Federal investigators suspected certain hotel employees were using racial profiling as camouflage, while organized theft and fraud operated behind the scenes. And without realizing it, Nathaniel Vaughn's secret internal audit had begun moving dangerously close to the same people the FBI was already watching. By the beginning of October, pressure inside Vaughn International was building quietly beneath the surface. Executives were nervous. Anonymous emails started appearing. Surveillance files disappeared from company servers. 2 employees unexpectedly resigned within the same week. Nathaniel sensed time was running out. Someone inside the company had started realizing he was investigating them. That was why he made the decision to visit the Crown Meridian Hotel personally, and without warning anyone. He chose the property carefully. More complaints originated there than almost any other Vaughn location in the Midwest. Financial discrepancies connected to missing luxury items repeatedly traced back to its management division. And according to internal data, black guests at the Crown Meridian experienced security incidents at nearly 4 times the rate of white guests. Nathaniel believed the hotel might finally expose whoever was responsible. He just never imagined the truth would reveal itself the moment he walked through the front doors. And on the night he arrived at the Crown Meridian Hotel, everything finally exploded. Rain poured steadily across downtown Chicago the night Dr. Nathaniel Vaughn arrived at the Crown Meridian Hotel. The city glowed beneath reflections of red brake lights and wet pavement, while luxury cars lined the entrance beneath the hotel's massive gold-trimmed awning. Inside, guests laughed beneath towering chandeliers while soft jazz drifted through the marble lobby. Everything about the Crown Meridian projected wealth, exclusivity, and perfection. Nathaniel stood quietly inside the back seat of his black Mercedes for a moment before stepping out into the cold night air. He adjusted the cuffs of his charcoal overcoat and looked up at the building he had spent years transforming into the flagship symbol of Vaughn International Hotels. The massive glass entrance reflected the city lights like polished mirrors. 15 years earlier, Nathaniel personally approved every detail of the property's design. He remembered walking through unfinished hallways while construction crews worked overnight shifts. He remembered studying floor plans until 3 in the morning. The Crown Meridian was more than a hotel to him. It was proof that someone who grew up watching his mother clean hotel rooms could one day own the entire building. But as Nathaniel handed his suitcase to the valet stand that night, the first sign of trouble appeared almost immediately. The young valet barely looked at him. Instead, he hurried past Nathaniel toward a white couple stepping out of a Bentley directly behind him. "Welcome to the Crown Meridian," the valet said warmly to them while reaching for their luggage. Nathaniel waited quietly for several seconds before speaking. "Excuse me," he said calmly. "Could someone assist with my bags?" The valet turned with visible irritation crossing his face, as though Nathaniel's presence had interrupted something more important. His name tag read Tyler Brooks. Self-parking is around the corner," Tyler replied quickly while gesturing toward the street. Nathaniel glanced toward the hotel entrance where two other valets were already unloading luggage for guests who had arrived after him. "I'm checking in," Nathaniel said. Tyler's expression shifted subtly, not openly hostile, just dismissive enough to communicate exactly what he was thinking. "Right," he answered flatly. "Well, valet service is usually reserved for hotel guests." Nathaniel felt the familiar sting immediately. The assumption, the quiet judgment, the same look his mother once described after being accused of theft decades earlier. But Nathaniel simply nodded and reached for his suitcase himself. He had learned long ago that the most revealing moments happened when people believed nobody important was watching them. And what Tyler Brooks did not realize was that every interaction near the hotel entrance was now being analyzed through Vaughn International's newly installed AI guest behavior monitoring system. Nathaniel had personally approved the program 6 weeks earlier. This wasn't random, he thought quietly while walking toward the entrance. Someone was hiding something. The moment Nathaniel entered the lobby, he noticed the atmosphere shift around him. Some guests looked briefly before turning away. Others stared slightly too long. Staff members glanced toward security cameras and then back toward him again. Nathaniel had experienced this kind of tension before during his undercover visits to other Vaughn properties. But something about the Crown Meridian felt different. More coordinated, more alert, as though employees had been trained to identify certain types of guests before problems occurred. Nathaniel rolled his suitcase slowly across the marble floor toward the front desk, where a blonde woman in a Navy executive uniform looked up from her computer. Her name tag read Claire Whitmore, front desk supervisor. For a brief second, her smile appeared professional and automatic. Then her eyes settled on Nathaniel more carefully, and the warmth disappeared almost instantly. "Can I help you?" she asked politely, though her tone carried distance beneath it. Nathaniel placed his reservation confirmation and Black American Express Centurion card on the counter. "Reservation for Nathaniel Vaughn," he said calmly. Claire glanced at the card first, then at Nathaniel, then back at the screen. Her fingers slowed against the keyboard. "The Presidential Skyline Suite?" she asked carefully. "That's correct." Claire's expression tightened almost invisibly. "I'm going to need some additional verification before we proceed." Nathaniel looked at her quietly. "Additional verification?" Claire nodded while continuing to type. "It's standard procedure for certain reservations." Nathaniel knew immediately that was false. Vaughn International policy specifically prohibited additional scrutiny based solely on room class or guest appearance. And what Claire Whitmore didn't realize was that Nathaniel himself wrote those policies. Before Nathaniel could respond, an older white couple approached the adjacent check-in counter carrying shopping bags from luxury boutiques across Michigan Avenue. Claire immediately shifted tone. Her posture softened. Her smile returned naturally. "Good evening," she said warmly. "Welcome back to the Crown Meridian." Nathaniel stood silently while Claire upgraded the couple to a better suite without requesting identification beyond a simple credit card swipe. No hesitation, no verification, no suspicion. Less than 90 seconds later, they were walking toward the elevators laughing about dinner reservations while Nathaniel still waited at the counter holding his room confirmation. But Vaughn noticed something disturbing. Claire kept glancing toward a security monitor mounted discreetly behind the desk. Each time she looked up, a security guard near the elevators appeared to watch Nathaniel more closely. Nathaniel's instincts sharpened immediately. This wasn't random. Someone was hiding something. Claire finally looked back toward him. "I apologize for the delay," she said, though she sounded anything but apologetic. "There appears to be an issue with your payment authorization." Nathaniel stared at the Black Centurion card resting on the counter between them. One of the most exclusive financial cards in the world. Invitation only. Issued to individuals with enormous spending power and extensive financial histories. What issue exactly? Nathaniel asked quietly. Claire hesitated just long enough to reveal uncertainty. The system flagged the transaction for manual review. Nathaniel already knew the hotel payment system could not independently flag a Centurion card unless an employee manually triggered review protocols. Someone at the Crown Meridian had intentionally escalated scrutiny around his reservation. And judging by Claire's nervous behavior, she understood exactly what she was doing. Nathaniel leaned slightly closer to the counter. Would this same review be happening if I looked different? Claire's eyes widened instantly. Sir, absolutely not. But the tension in her voice betrayed her. Nearby guests had started paying attention now. A businessman standing near the concierge desk subtly lifted his phone toward the scene. Across the lobby, security guards exchanged another glance. Nathaniel noticed one of them touching an earpiece while staring directly at him. What Claire Whitmore didn't realize was that Nathaniel had spent 6 months studying interactions exactly like this across his company. Every hesitation, every coded phrase, every subtle act of suspicion disguised as professionalism. Nathaniel reached calmly into his jacket pocket and placed his driver's license beside the reservation documents. Claire studied it carefully, too carefully. Her eyes lingered on his name longer than expected. Nathaniel could almost see the confusion forming in her mind. She recognized the surname Vaughn. Most employees in the company knew the founder's name. But standing in front of her was a black man in his late 50s traveling alone without security, assistance, or executive notice. He did not fit the image she expected. And before Claire could process her uncertainty fully, the atmosphere inside the lobby changed completely. A sharp scream suddenly echoed from the elevator hallway across the marble floor. Conversation stopped instantly. Guests turned toward the sound. One woman near the concierge desk gasped while hotel staff rushed toward the corridor. Nathaniel looked up slowly just as a terrified voice shouted again from near the presidential suites. Then a woman screamed from the elevator hallway. The scream came from somewhere near the private elevator corridor leading toward the executive suites on the upper floors of the Crown Meridian Hotel. Guests turned instantly as a woman in an expensive cream-colored coat stumbled into the lobby, clutching her purse against her chest. Her breathing was uneven. Her mascara had begun running beneath her eyes. 2 hotel employees hurried behind her, while several guests stepped aside in confusion. Nathaniel Vaughn recognized her immediately. Evelyn Beaumont, Chicago socialite, real estate investor, frequent Vaughn International guest. She had appeared in magazines for years attending charity galas and political fundraisers beside celebrities and senators. Nathaniel had personally met her twice at company events, though judging by the panic in her face now, she clearly did not recognize him standing near the front desk. "My necklace is gone," Evelyn shouted loudly enough for the entire lobby to hear. "Someone stole my necklace." The room fell silent almost immediately. Claire Whitmore straightened behind the front desk, while security officers near the elevators moved closer. "Mrs. Beaumont," Claire said carefully, "please calm down." "What happened?" Evelyn pointed frantically toward the elevator hallway. "My diamond necklace. It's missing from my suite." Her voice trembled with panic and anger. "It's worth at least $250,000. A wave of whispers moved through the lobby. Several guests lifted phones higher. One man quietly stepped closer to record the scene more clearly, while another guest muttered something under his breath about insurance fraud. Nathaniel remained still beside the counter, while hotel security instinctively shifted attention toward him. He noticed it immediately. The subtle change in posture, the narrowed eyes, the quiet suspicion forming across faces that moments earlier barely acknowledged him at all. Within seconds, Head of Security Daniel Mercer emerged from the rear hallway beside the concierge office. Tall, broad-shouldered, and carrying himself with the confidence of a former police officer, Mercer scanned the lobby quickly before locking eyes on Nathaniel Vaughn. Nathaniel recognized the look instantly. Mercer was not searching for evidence. He was searching for someone who looked believable as a suspect. "What exactly is missing?" Mercer asked while approaching Evelyn Beaumont. "A diamond necklace," she replied breathlessly. "Custom Cartier piece. White diamonds surrounded by blue sapphires." Mercer nodded sharply. "When did you last see it?" Evelyn pointed back toward the elevator corridor. "Less than 30 minutes ago before I went downstairs for dinner." Mercer's eyes shifted again toward Nathaniel, standing near the front desk with his suitcase beside him. "Who has been near the executive elevators?" he asked. Claire Whitmore hesitated for only a fraction of a second before answering. "He was." Her eyes flicked toward Nathaniel. "He's been lingering near the lobby for a while." Nathaniel almost smiled at the wording. Lingering. Not checking in. Not waiting for assistance. Lingering. The kind of language people used when they wanted suspicion to sound reasonable. But Vaughn noticed something disturbing. Daniel Mercer never once asked for surveillance footage. He never questioned hotel staff. He never secured the scene upstairs. His attention moved toward Nathaniel almost immediately, as though he had already decided where this investigation was going. This wasn't random. Someone was hiding something. The lobby atmosphere shifted rapidly now. Guests whispered openly, while several employees pretended not to stare. A businessman standing near the piano quietly angled his phone camera toward Nathaniel and began recording. Across the room, a little black boy standing beside his mother near the concierge desk watched the scene with wide, frightened eyes. The child looked no older than 8 years old. Nathaniel noticed the mother slowly pulling her son closer the moment security started moving toward him. That single gesture hit Nathaniel harder than anything else so far, because suddenly he was no longer standing inside the Crown Meridian as a billionaire hotel owner. He was 12 years old again, watching security guards humiliate his mother inside the Wellington Grand Hotel, while strangers stared without helping. The memory struck him so sharply that for a brief second, he almost forgot where he was. Then Evelyn Beaumont pointed directly toward him. "I saw him near the elevators," she said loudly. "He was standing there earlier." Daniel Mercer looked at Nathaniel with growing certainty. "That's enough for me." The words dropped heavily across the silent lobby. Several guests exchanged uncomfortable glances while phones continued recording from every angle. Near the entrance, an elderly white veteran wearing a navy overcoat shook his head slowly and muttered under his breath, "This doesn't feel right." But nobody intervened. Nathaniel finally spoke. His voice remained calm despite the tension tightening around him. "You're making assumptions without evidence." Daniel Mercer stepped closer. "Sir, I'm going to need you to cooperate." "Cooperate with what exactly?" Nathaniel asked. "Being treated like a criminal because I walked through my own hotel?" Mercer's expression hardened immediately. "Your hotel?" A few guests laughed nervously, assuming Nathaniel was bluffing. Claire Whitmore folded her arms behind the front desk, as if convinced she had already figured him out. Nathaniel could see it in her eyes now. She believed he was trying to talk his way out of trouble by pretending to be important. Mercer extended his hand toward Nathaniel's suitcase. "Open the bag." Nathaniel looked directly at him. "No." That single word changed everything. Mercer's posture shifted instantly from suspicion to authority. "Sir, refusal to cooperate during an active theft investigation gives me probable cause to detain you." Nathaniel stared at him in disbelief. "You have no probable cause." "We'll let the police sort that out," Mercer answered coldly. The businessman recording nearby quietly whispered, "This is insane," while continuing to film. Nathaniel noticed more phones appearing throughout the lobby now. Some guests looked uncomfortable. Others looked entertained. But nobody understood the full danger of what was happening. Because hidden deep inside Vaughn International's private monitoring system, AI behavior analysis software was already flagging the interaction in real time for racial bias escalation. Multiple alerts had been automatically forwarded to corporate legal servers less than 60 seconds earlier. Daniel Mercer moved first. His hand closed firmly around Nathaniel's wrist while another security officer approached from behind. The lobby fell completely silent. Nathaniel did not resist. He simply stood there staring at the marble floor beneath his polished black shoes, while security forced his arms behind his back. Somewhere nearby, a woman whispered, "Oh my God." Nathaniel heard the metallic rattle before he felt the cold steel touch his skin. In that moment, time seemed to slow around him. He could hear champagne glasses clinking softly somewhere near the restaurant entrance. He could hear rain striking the massive glass windows facing Michigan Avenue. He could hear the nervous breathing of guests standing only feet away pretending this was normal. Then the handcuffs snapped shut around his wrists. Cold metal tightened against his skin while camera flashes flickered throughout the lobby. Nathaniel lowered his eyes briefly as humiliation settled across him like weight pressing into his chest. Not because he feared the accusation, but because he recognized the deeper truth unfolding around him. His mother had once stood exactly where he stood now. publicly judged, publicly humiliated, treated as guilty before anyone cared about facts. The little black boy near the concierge desk continued staring at him silently while his mother held his shoulder tighter. Nathaniel realized the child would probably remember this moment for the rest of his life. Daniel Mercer gripped Nathaniel's arm firmly while guests stepped backward to clear space. Claire Whitmore quickly picked up the phone behind the desk. "Call Chicago PD," she said urgently. "Tell them we have a theft suspect detained at the Crown Meridian." Nathaniel closed his eyes briefly as phones continued recording from every direction. Somewhere near the elevators, Evelyn Beaumont kept insisting she knew what she saw. The elderly veteran near the entrance looked visibly disturbed now. And outside, rain poured harder against the city streets while black SUVs approached the hotel entrance through traffic. But the second the handcuffs locked, Nathaniel Vaughn's phone connected to a private FBI conference line. Cut. The second Nathaniel Vaughn's phone connected to the encrypted FBI conference line inside his jacket pocket, the atmosphere inside the Crown Meridian Hotel began changing in ways nobody in the lobby understood yet. Rain hammered the streets outside, while the flashing reflection of headlights swept across the hotel's towering glass entrance. Several guests turned instinctively toward the doors as a convoy of black SUVs pulled sharply beneath the awning outside. Their tires hissed against the wet pavement before the engines shut off almost simultaneously. Daniel Mercer still held Nathaniel by the arm, completely unaware that the situation he believed he controlled was seconds away from collapsing around him. Claire Whitmore stood frozen behind the front desk, clutching the hotel phone, while Evelyn Beaumont continued insisting her necklace had been stolen. Guests whispered nervously throughout the marble lobby as more people lifted their phones to record. Some believed they were witnessing the arrest of a dangerous criminal. Others were beginning to suspect something far more serious was unfolding. Then the hotel doors opened. 5 federal agents entered the lobby with the calm precision of people used to walking into dangerous situations. Dark suits, expressionless faces, earpieces visible beneath neatly trimmed hair. Their presence alone changed the energy of the room immediately. Conversations stopped. Hotel staff stiffened. Security officers exchanged uncertain looks while the agents scanned the lobby in silence. Leading them was Agent Marcus Reed, a tall man in his 40s with sharp features and the controlled posture of someone who rarely raised his voice because he never needed to. The moment Reed's eyes landed on Nathaniel Vaughn standing in handcuffs beside the front desk, his entire expression hardened. He walked forward quickly without breaking eye contact. "What the hell is this?" Reed demanded sharply. Daniel Mercer straightened defensively. "FBI?" he asked. "We have a theft suspect detained pending Chicago PD arrival." Reed's jaw tightened visibly as he looked from the handcuffs to Nathaniel's face and back again. "You detained Dr. Nathaniel Vaughn?" Mercer hesitated slightly now. "Sir, we were responding to a guest complaint involving stolen property." Reed stepped closer. "Do you have any idea who this man is?" Mercer glanced briefly toward Claire Whitmore before answering carefully. "He claimed to own the hotel." Several guests nearby laughed nervously again, still unaware of the truth. But Agent Marcus Reed did not laugh. "Claimed," Reed repeated coldly. "Dr. Nathaniel Vaughn is the founder and sole owner of Vaughn International Hotels." The silence that followed felt almost violent. Phones lifted higher instantly. Several guests gasped out loud, while Claire Whitmore's face lost color completely. Daniel Mercer released Nathaniel's arm, so quickly it looked almost involuntary. Across the lobby, Evelyn Beaumont stared in confusion while whispering spread rapidly through the crowd. "That's the owner?" someone muttered. Another guest lowered his phone briefly in disbelief before raising it again to keep recording. Nathaniel slowly lifted his cuffed hands toward Agent Reed. "Good evening, Marcus," he said quietly. Reed looked furious. "Nathaniel, I told you not to come here alone." Nathaniel's voice remained calm despite the humiliation still hanging heavily over the room. "I needed to see it for myself." Reed nodded once before turning toward Daniel Mercer and Claire Whitmore with visible anger. "Remove those handcuffs now." Mercer fumbled for the key with shaking hands. The metallic click echoed sharply through the lobby as the restraints finally came free. Nathaniel rubbed his wrists slowly while guests continued filming from every direction. Somewhere near the entrance, The elderly veteran who earlier muttered that something felt wrong shook his head in disgust. Jesus Christ, he whispered quietly. Near the concierge desk, the little black boy still watched Nathaniel closely while his mother stared at the scene with tears forming in her eyes. But the humiliation of Nathaniel Vaughn was no longer the center of the investigation. Agent Marcus Reed turned toward hotel management with an expression that made several employees visibly nervous. "Where's Richard Holloway?" he asked. Claire Whitmore blinked in confusion. "Mr. Holloway?" Reed nodded sharply. "General manager of the Crown Meridian Hotel." Claire swallowed hard. "He's upstairs in the executive offices." Reed exchanged a brief look with the other agents behind him before speaking again. "Nobody contacts him." Daniel Mercer looked stunned. "Wait, you're not here because of the necklace?" Reed turned slowly toward him. "We're here because Richard Holloway has been under federal investigation for 6 months. The lobby exploded with whispers instantly. Nathaniel watched silently, while confusion spread across faces throughout the room. Evelyn Beaumont looked completely lost now, while guests began recording even more aggressively. Some had already started live streaming the entire incident online. The hashtag Crown Meridian was beginning to trend across social media before anyone inside the hotel fully understood why. Reed continued speaking. "Richard Holloway is suspected of operating an internal theft and fraud network through multiple Vaughn International properties." Claire Whitmore grabbed the edge of the counter for balance. "That's impossible," she whispered. Reed ignored her. "We have evidence linking Holloway to luxury jewelry theft, insurance fraud, financial laundering, evidence tampering, and obstruction of internal investigations." Daniel Mercer stared blankly. "No, Richard would never." Reed cut him off immediately. "Richard Holloway used racial profiling to redirect suspicion away from hotel employees involved in theft operations." That sentence changed everything. Nathaniel felt the weight of the truth settle across the lobby like cold fog. Every suspicion he carried for months suddenly connected together all at once. Reed continued explaining while agents moved quietly toward the executive elevators. Guests of color were disproportionately targeted during investigations because management assumed accusations against them would receive less scrutiny. Claire Whitmore's breathing became shallow now. "No," Reed's voice sharpened. "Complaints were deleted from company systems. Surveillance footage disappeared. Innocent guests were pressured into silence while stolen property moved through fraudulent insurance claims." Nathaniel closed his eyes briefly. His worst fears had been true all along. This wasn't just discrimination. It was organized corruption hiding behind discrimination. Mercer looked physically ill now while Reed pulled a folder from beneath his arm containing printed surveillance stills and financial records. "Richard Holloway framed multiple employees over the last 4 years," Reed said. "Some lost their jobs. Others were arrested." Nathaniel looked toward the marble floor for a long moment as memories of his mother's humiliation decades earlier returned once again. The same assumptions, the same public judgment, the same damage done before facts mattered. Then came the moment that shattered what little credibility remained inside the lobby. Evelyn Beaumont suddenly froze beside the concierge desk while searching frantically through her oversized designer handbag. Her face changed instantly. "Wait," she whispered quietly. Everyone turned toward her. Evelyn reached into a second smaller handbag hanging over her shoulder and slowly pulled out the missing cardie, a necklace with trembling fingers. The diamonds reflected brightly beneath the chandelier lights as complete silence swept across the room again. "Oh my God," she whispered. "It was in my other bag." Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. The humiliation hanging in the air became unbearable. Daniel Mercer looked like he might collapse where he stood. Claire Whitmore covered her mouth in horror. Across the lobby, several guests openly cursed under their breath while phones continued recording every second. One woman quietly said, "They handcuffed him for nothing." But Nathaniel Vaughn knew it had never really been about the necklace. The accusation only exposed a system already designed to see him as guilty before evidence ever existed. Within minutes, the videos flooded social media. Livestream clips spread across TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube faster than hotel management could react. Millions of people watched the billionaire owner of a luxury hotel chain get publicly handcuffed inside his own property while federal agents exposed corruption behind the scenes. News outlets began contacting Vaughn International executives almost immediately. Comment sections exploded with outrage. Some viewers focused on the racial profiling. Others focused on the FBI investigation. But one question appeared again and again across every platform. How many innocent people had already suffered because of the system operating inside the Crown Meridian Hotel? Nathaniel looked around the lobby slowly while federal agents disappeared upstairs toward Richard Holloway's office. Guests stared at him differently now. Some embarrassed, some ashamed, some afraid. But the FBI still hadn't revealed the worst part. As federal agents disappeared into the executive levels of the Crown Meridian Hotel, the atmosphere inside the lobby shifted from confusion to fear. Guests who moments earlier believed they were watching a routine security incident now realized they were standing in the middle of a federal corruption investigation tied to one of the largest luxury hotel companies in America. Phones continued recording from every angle while hotel employees whispered nervously among themselves. Nathaniel Vaughn stood silently near the front desk, rubbing the red marks left behind by the handcuffs. He barely noticed the cameras anymore. His attention remained fixed on the private elevator where FBI agents had just taken Richard Holloway upstairs under armed supervision. For 6 months, Nathaniel suspected something poisonous had spread through parts of Vaughn International. Now, standing inside his own flagship hotel after being publicly humiliated in front of hundreds of people, he realized the truth was even worse than he imagined. This was not misconduct by one manager. It was a network. Agent Marcus Reed returned from a brief conversation with one of the federal agents near the elevators and walked directly toward Nathaniel. "We've secured Holloway's office," Reed said quietly, "and we found enough already to justify immediate federal seizure orders across multiple properties." Nathaniel looked at him carefully. "How many?" Reed paused for a second before answering. "At least 12 hotels connected so far." Nathaniel felt something heavy settle in his chest. 12 properties. That meant this operation had spread through nearly a quarter of his domestic luxury portfolio without detection. Reed continued speaking while nearby guests strained to overhear every word. "We recovered encrypted financial ledgers, deleted complaint archives, falsified reimbursement reports, and internal communications connecting senior management teams across multiple Vaughn International locations." Nathaniel's jaw tightened slightly. "How much money?" Reed glanced briefly toward the lobby cameras before lowering his voice. "Right now, we estimate somewhere between $18 and $24 million in fraudulent claims and stolen assets." Even Nathaniel looked stunned by that number. Millions stolen while innocent guests and employees carried suspicion for crimes they never committed. And according to the FBI, racial profiling was not just collateral damage inside the scheme. It was part of the system itself. Within the hour, federal raid teams began moving across Chicago, Atlanta, Miami, Las Vegas, and New York simultaneously. Search warrants hit Vaughn International properties before news stations even confirmed the investigation publicly. Executives who believed they were arriving at ordinary work meetings suddenly found federal agents waiting inside conference rooms. Security footage later obtained by reporters showed employees carrying boxes of files out of corporate offices while panicked managers made desperate phone calls from hotel corridors. Hard drives disappeared into evidence bags. Locked cabinets were forced open. Financial records buried for years finally surfaced under federal authority. Inside one regional accounting office, investigators uncovered spreadsheets detailing fraudulent insurance claims linked directly to stolen jewelry reported by wealthy hotel guests. Besides, several entries were handwritten notes identifying which guests were considered high risk for credibility challenges. Most of those guests were Black. Some were professional athletes. Others were doctors, attorneys, and executives who later described being followed by hotel security or questioned aggressively without cause. Nathaniel stared at the evidence photos Agent Reed placed before him and felt physically sick. His company's name had become attached to the same kind of humiliation his mother experienced decades earlier. The deeper agents searched, the more disturbing the operation became. Employees who privately complained about discriminatory practices were often transferred, intimidated, or quietly terminated. Internal investigations repeatedly disappeared after reaching specific executives. One hotel manager admitted under questioning that staff members were unofficially encouraged to monitor certain guest profiles more aggressively during theft investigations. Another executive confessed that minority guests were considered less likely to pursue lengthy legal battles after public embarrassment. Nathaniel listened silently while Agent Reed outlined the evidence building across multiple states. They used assumptions as camouflage, Reed explained. Once security focused on a black guest, nobody paid attention to what management was doing behind the scenes. Nathaniel closed his eyes briefly. That sentence hit him harder than the handcuffs had, because suddenly everything connected together. The deleted complaints, the false accusations, the suspicious settlements. The pattern was never random. Someone inside Vaughn International had discovered that racial bias could become a shield. While innocent people defended themselves against suspicion, the real criminals quietly moved stolen property through insurance systems and fraudulent reimbursements. Across social media, the Crown Meridian incident exploded nationwide. News anchors replayed footage of Nathaniel Vaughn standing in handcuffs beneath the hotel chandeliers, while commentators debated racial profiling inside luxury businesses. Civil rights organizations demanded accountability. Former Vaughn International guests began sharing personal experiences online. Some described being questioned aggressively by hotel staff despite valid reservations. Others claimed management dismissed complaints until attorneys became involved. One former employee posted that supervisors were trained to identify suspicious guest behavior, using guidelines that overwhelmingly targeted minorities. By midnight, the story dominated national headlines. But inside the Crown Meridian Hotel, Nathaniel Vaughn was no longer thinking about public relations. He was thinking about his mother. He could still remember sitting in the back seat of that old taxi in 1979 while Denise Vaughn cried silently beside him after security falsely accused her of theft at the Wellington Grand Hotel. He remembered how powerless she looked, how embarrassed she felt even after proving her innocence. Nathaniel spent his entire adult life trying to build a company different from the one that humiliated her. He believed Vaughn International represented progress, dignity, respect, opportunity. But standing there now inside his own hotel after being handcuffed by his own security staff, Nathaniel realized something painful. Success had not erased the problem. It simply hid it beneath polished marble floors and luxury branding. For the first time in years, Nathaniel wondered how many other innocent people had suffered while executives inside his company protected themselves behind silence and assumptions. Agent Marcus Reed interrupted his thoughts carefully. "Nathaniel, there's something else." Nathaniel looked up immediately. Reed hesitated longer this time. "We believe someone inside Vaughn International knew you were coming tonight." Nathaniel's expression hardened instantly. "That's impossible." Reed shook his head slowly. "Your travel records were sealed. But security logs show unusual internal communication activity starting 40 minutes before your arrival." Nathaniel stared at him in silence. Reed continued. "Several employees received private alerts from upper management instructing them to monitor an unidentified guest matching your description." Nathaniel felt cold anger rise slowly through him now. He had spent months suspecting corruption inside his company. He secretly believed someone was weaponizing racial profiling to hide criminal activity. But he never realized how deep the operation actually reached. If someone knew he was coming, then the humiliation in the lobby may not have been spontaneous at all. It may have been planned. Reed studied Nathaniel carefully before speaking again. And then, Agent Marcus Reed said quietly, "We discovered who really ordered the handcuffs." Agent Marcus Reed stood in the quiet corner of the Crown Meridian Hotel's executive hallway, his voice lower now, controlled but heavy with implication. The sound of distant footsteps from federal agents moving through Richard Holloway's office echoed faintly behind him. Nathaniel Vaughn did not speak immediately. He simply stared at Reed, waiting for the sentence he already felt coming. "We traced the authorization logs," Reed said finally. The directive to escalate security response did not come from hotel management. Nathaniel's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes hardened further. Reed continued. "It came from the corporate board level." A long silence followed, the kind that makes every sound in a building feel louder than it should be. Nathaniel slowly turned his head toward the glass wall overlooking the lobby below. Guests were still gathered there, phones still raised. Security still frozen in uncertainty. The system inside his own company had not just failed him. It had been actively pointed at him. Reed handed Nathaniel a sealed federal file. Inside were printed communication logs, encrypted email threads, and authorization timestamps. Nathaniel flipped through them slowly. Each page confirmed the same name repeating across multiple channels. Leonard Grayson, Vaughn International Board Member, Senior Corporate Advisor, Trusted Architect of Internal Policy Oversight. Nathaniel's hand stopped moving for a moment. Then he turned another page. More instructions, more directives, all pointing toward one coordinated objective. Reed spoke carefully. Grayson authorized security escalation protocols for your arrival tonight. Nathaniel looked up slowly. He ordered my own hotel staff to detain me. Reed nodded once. Yes. Another pause followed, heavier this time. He also instructed management to treat you as an unidentified guest under standard suspicion procedures. Nathaniel closed the file. For a moment, he said nothing. Then quietly, almost to himself, he asked, "Why?" Reed didn't answer immediately. Instead, he glanced toward the elevator where Richard Holloway had been taken into custody. "Because you announced internal restructuring plans 2 weeks ago," Reed said. "We reviewed your board communications. You intended to conduct full executive audits, immediate terminations, financial transparency enforcement across all properties." Nathaniel exhaled slowly. Reed continued. "Grayson believed if you were publicly discredited before those reforms were implemented, your authority over the board would weaken." Nathaniel finally understood. This was not just corruption. It was preemptive sabotage, a coordinated effort inside his own leadership structure designed to remove him before he could clean it out. And racial profiling had been used as the weapon to do it. Minutes later, federal agents escorted Leonard Grayson into the executive conference room on the upper floor of the Crown Meridian Hotel. He was in his late 60s, impeccably dressed, calm in the way powerful people often are when they believe they still control the outcome. But when he saw Nathaniel standing near the window, his expression changed for the first time. Not fear, recognition, because now he understood the situation had collapsed. "Nathaniel," Grayson said carefully. Nathaniel turned to face him. "You authorized my detention." Grayson exhaled slowly, choosing words with precision. "I authorized a security response based on available risk indicators." Nathaniel took one step closer. "Risk indicators?" Grayson's jaw tightened slightly. There were internal concerns regarding unauthorized access to restricted areas. Nathaniel's voice remained calm, but the pressure beneath it was unmistakable. "You mean the lobby of my own hotel?" Silence filled the room. Agent Reed stood between them now, observing carefully. Grayson shifted slightly, attempting to regain control of the conversation. "Nathaniel, you were never meant to be treated that way. This was a procedural misinterpretation at operational level." Nathaniel looked at him directly. "Do not reduce this to a misunderstanding." The words cut through the room. Even the federal agents stopped moving for a moment. Nathaniel continued, his voice steady but sharp. "You didn't misinterpret anything, Leonard. You directed it." Grayson's expression tightened. "I was protecting the company." Nathaniel stepped forward again. "From me." Another silence followed. Longer this time. Then Nathaniel's voice lowered. "You didn't just betray this company," he said. "You betrayed every person who trusted us to treat them with dignity." Grayson tried to respond, but Nathaniel did not let him. "You used security protocols designed to protect guests as tools to silence, control, and misdirect investigations." Reed placed a formal arrest document on the table. "Leonard Grayson," he said calmly, "you are being placed under federal arrest for conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and corporate fraud." For the first time, Grayson's composure cracked. "This is a misunderstanding that can be resolved internally," he said quickly. Reed shook his head. "This is already federal." Downstairs, in the lobby, Richard Holloway was also being led out in handcuffs by federal agents. Guests parted silently as he passed through the marble floor he once controlled. Claire Whitmore stood behind the front desk watching everything unfold, her hands shaking uncontrollably. She tried to speak, but nothing came out. Then, finally, she broke down completely, realizing every decision she made that night had been part of something far larger than she understood. Security personnel were suspended on the spot. Hotel management was removed from access systems. Federal agents began securing digital records across the property. And Leonard Grayson, once one of the most influential figures inside Vaughn International, was escorted out of the Crown Meridian Hotel in silence. Nathaniel Vaughn remained standing near the glass window overlooking the lobby, watching everything collapse beneath the weight of truth. But even as arrests were made and systems were dismantled, one final question still remained unanswered. The Crown Meridian Hotel was still under federal control when Nathaniel Vaughn returned to the lobby the next morning. The marble floors were no longer filled with guests or champagne glasses or the quiet hum of luxury tourism. Instead, federal agents moved through the space with measured precision, documenting systems, collecting server logs, and securing evidence that would later be used across multiple indictments. The place that had once symbolized prestige now felt like a crime scene frozen in time. Nathaniel stood at the center of it all in silence. No security surrounded him now. No staff questioned him. No one doubted who he was. The transformation was complete, but the weight of what had happened still lingered in every corner of the room. Agent Marcus Reed approached from the concierge side, holding a folder marked with updated federal summaries. "We've secured confirmation across all 12 properties," he said. "Holloway's network is fully documented. Grayson's directives are now part of the official conspiracy case file." Nathaniel nodded slowly but didn't respond immediately. His attention was focused on something else. The front desk where Claire Whitmore had once questioned him. The space where assumptions had been made in seconds without evidence. Reed continued speaking, but Nathaniel's mind was already moving forward. "We'll need your cooperation for the next phase of compliance restructuring," Reed said. "Industry-wide review panels are being formed." Nathaniel finally turned slightly. "It won't be enough to just fix this company," he said quietly. Reed looked at him carefully. "Then what are you planning?" Nathaniel closed his eyes briefly before answering. "We make sure it never happens again anywhere." 2 weeks later, Vaughn International headquarters hosted a press conference that drew national attention. Major news networks filled the room. Industry executives watched closely. Civil rights leaders sat in the front rows. Nathaniel Vaughn stepped up to the podium without hesitation. Cameras clicked continuously as silence settled over the audience. "What happened at the Crown Meridian Hotel was not an isolated incident," he began. "It was the result of systems that allowed bias to replace evidence and assumptions to replace truth." Behind him, a screen lit up displaying a new framework. The Vaughn Protocol. Nathaniel explained it clearly. Real-time AI bias tracking integrated into every guest interaction. Independent civil rights monitoring boards with unrestricted access to internal systems. Mandatory third-party audits conducted quarterly. Anonymous reporting channels that bypassed internal management entirely. And federal compliance oversight embedded directly into operational standards across all Vaughn International properties. The room remained completely silent as he continued. "This is not public relations," he said. "This is structural change." Within months, the Vaughn Protocol spread beyond his company. Competing luxury hotel chains began adopting similar frameworks after facing pressure from shareholders and public scrutiny. News outlets debated whether the hospitality industry was entering a new era of accountability. Congress opened hearings focused on discrimination in luxury accommodations, citing the Crown Meridian case repeatedly as a turning point. Nathaniel Vaughn, once known primarily as a private billionaire hotel owner, became a national figure associated with systemic reform in hospitality standards. Interviews followed. Panels. Policy discussions. But Nathaniel rarely spoke about himself. When asked, he always redirected attention toward the broader issue of dignity and fairness in customer service systems that had gone unchecked for decades. Months later, Nathaniel traveled alone to Chicago on a quiet morning. No press followed him. No federal agents accompanied him. He arrived at a modest building that once housed the Wellington Grand Hotel, where his mother, Denise Vaughn, had worked as a housekeeping staff member decades earlier. The building had since been renovated, but parts of the original structure remained. Nathaniel stepped inside slowly, remembering the stories she once told him about long shifts, quiet humiliation, and the day she was falsely accused of stealing by a guest who never apologized. He walked through the lobby until he reached a quiet corner near the entrance. From his briefcase, he removed a framed photograph of his mother. He placed it carefully on a small wall stand that had been converted into a memorial space for former staff. Beneath it, a plaque had been installed. The words were simple, but deliberate. Dignity belongs to everyone. Nathaniel stood there for a long moment without speaking. People walked past him without knowing who he was. And that was exactly how he wanted it. Because the story was never about recognition. It was about correction. About systems that had ignored truth for too long. As he finally turned to leave, he spoke softly, almost to himself, as if answering a question that had followed him his entire life. Sometimes the people treated like suspects, he said quietly, are the only people telling the truth. The Crown Meridian case had already changed the hospitality industry in ways executives were still struggling to fully understand. Policies had been rewritten, training programs redesigned. Entire leadership teams across multiple hotel groups were under review. But for Nathaniel Vaughn, the real weight of the story was never in the headlines or the corporate reforms. It was in the quiet moments afterward, when the noise faded and only the consequences remained. He stood once more inside the Crown Meridian lobby on the final day of federal oversight operations. The marble floors had been restored to their polished shine, but the atmosphere was different now. Calmer, more controlled, as if the building itself understood it had been part of something that could never be erased. Agent Marcus Reed approached him one last time, handing over the final case closure summary. Everything connected to Holloway and Grayson has been processed, Reed said. Charges are moving forward. The network is fully dismantled. Nathaniel nodded slowly, accepting the folder without emotion. And the staff? He asked. Reed hesitated. Some will face charges. Others will never work in this industry again. Nathaniel didn't respond immediately. He simply looked across the lobby where it had all begun. Claire Whitmore had already been terminated and removed from all corporate systems. Daniel Mercer's security license had been revoked pending investigation. Richard Holloway was in federal custody. Leonard Grayson had entered formal prosecution proceedings. The system that once operated quietly beneath polished luxury branding had been fully exposed. But what remained now was not just accountability. It was memory. Nathaniel walked slowly toward the center of the lobby, stopping beneath the chandelier where everything had collapsed months earlier. He could still picture it clearly. The phones, the whispers, the handcuffs. The moment his identity was stripped away in front of strangers who never bothered to ask questions. But he also remembered something else. The moment the FBI walked in. The moment truth finally interrupted assumption. And the moment silence turned into accountability. He turned slightly as Agent Reed prepared to leave. Marcus, Nathaniel said quietly. Reed paused. Nathaniel looked at him for a long moment before speaking again. Make sure this doesn't become just another case file people forget. Reed nodded once. It won't. And then he left. Nathaniel remained standing alone in the lobby for several minutes. Not as a billionaire, not as a CEO, but as someone who had seen exactly how quickly dignity could be taken from people when systems were allowed to decide who deserved it. He thought about his mother again, about the way she had been looked at, about how easily her truth had been dismissed simply because of perception. And he understood something now that he hadn't understood before. Justice was not a moment. It was a responsibility that had to be maintained long after the headlines disappeared. Later that evening, the final footage from the Crown Meridian incident was released publicly as part of the Federal Transparency Report. Within hours, it reached millions of viewers again, not as entertainment, but as evidence. Evidence of how quickly assumptions could escalate into irreversible consequences when unchecked authority met unchecked bias. And as the video circulated once more across screens around the country, the questions began appearing everywhere in the comment sections, in conversations, in living rooms, and across social platforms. What would you have done if you witnessed this in person? Do you think justice was truly served? Have you ever seen someone judged before people knew who they really were? Then the final message appeared as a preview for what came next. A new case, a new story, a new investigation into power and hidden systems operating behind closed doors. And if you thought this story was unbelievable, the narration continued. Wait until you hear about the billionaire judge who secretly tested his own courtroom staff. Because in the end, these stories were never just about one moment. They were about the systems underneath them. And if you want more unbelievable real stories about power, corruption, and justice, make sure you subscribe.